Hey guys, how's it going? I hope everybody's doing really well out there today. A couple of years ago, I made a video showing how to run or how to set up a VPN Docker container on your server and then route other container traffic through it to basically use the VPN container as a VPN for other Docker containers. We did that in Portainer, and here recently I made a video about Dockge, and that video seemed to do very well. And then even more recently, somebody reached out and asked if I could make a video showing how to set up a VPN container in Dockge and then show how to route other container traffic through that container, again, in Dockge. So that's what we're going to do in today's video. We're going to add a few other little steps in here for some Proxmox related things. I'll try to have everything timestamped down below. So if you're not on Proxmox, you can skip that section, but we will be doing this in Proxmox, though you don't have to. With that said, let's jump over to my desktop and take a look at getting Dockge set up. We're just going to blow through that because I already made that video. Again, that'll be linked in the description. We're going to get that set up real quick, and then we're going to get a VPN container, Gluetun, set up, and then we're going to start attaching some containers to it and going through some of the troubleshooting steps that I ran into so you can have an easier time than I have. Okay, so this is my Proxmox demo server. This is where I record or where I set up containers to do these tutorial videos. This part isn't necessarily Proxmox specific. Just pretend that we've SSH'd into any Docker server that I have control over. So the first thing I want to do is actually deploy Dockge, and that we're going to do that real easily. What I want to do is do a nano docker compose.yml. And that is just so that we can paste in the Docker Compose for Dockge. Again, I'm going to kind of blow through some of this. If you want more detailed information on this installation process, definitely head over to the video about Dockge linked in the video description. But basically, we're going to run this on port 5001. We've got our var run Docker just so it can connect to the Docker socket. I'm going to move this data folder. I don't want it to be here. I want it to be somewhere else. So we're just going to say home Docker Dockge /data. That's where our data for Dockge is going to live. And then everything else in here can be left alone. And I'll do Control O and Enter and Control X. And I'll just clear my screen. And then we'll do Docker Compose up-D. So we're going to let this install. Once it's done installing, we'll come back, we'll get logged in, and then we'll get some other containers deployed for the purpose of this video and encrypting some Docker traffic. Okay, so it's just been a couple of minutes, not too long at all, and we've got Dockge installed on our Docker server. So the next thing we want to do is go over and get logged into Dockge, but we need to get the IP address of this server first, right? So what I'll do, IPA, and right here on 238. That is the IP address we're looking for. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to put in port 5001 because that is the Dockge specific port that we declared in our Docker Compose to deploy this. So I'm going to go ahead and enter, and I'm going to say, yep, that's fine. Go ahead and continue. And now I'm going to create my user account, and we'll click create. And now we are logged into Dockge. So now that we're logged into Dockge, we can actually start deploying our Docker containers. And of course, the first Docker container that we want to install is Gluetun. That's the VPN container that I like to use. I've been using it for years and it works really well. So let's go ahead and get Gluetun installed on Dockge. Okay, so here we are on hub.docker.com. This is the official Gluetun Docker repository, I guess you could call it. We're just going to scroll down. Lots of good information in here as far as what it supports, how to do things. All of that is here on this page. I'll have this linked in the video description as well as the GitHub repository for this. What I want to do though is scroll down to right here. This is the Docker Compose that we're going to use for this setup. I've modified it just to make it custom for me because there's usernames and passwords, that sort of stuff that I'm going to have to block out later. But if you want more information or are looking for the Docker Compose for Gluetun, here it is. Again, it will be linked in the video description. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. We're back on our Dockge page. This is where we want to be. What I want to do is actually come over here and click on Compose. I'm going to call this Gluetun. Yeah, that's fine. Gluetun, like so. All of this other stuff is fine. I'm going to go ahead and copy my Docker Compose over here. I'm just going to paste this in, and we've got our version 3 service Gluetun. It is the image of McGraw Gluetun. The container name is Gluetun. Restart and let's stop. This is all fine. So basically and then I guess you'd want to change the volumes here for your specific setup. Again, I like to do home Docker container name. That's where I put all of my stuff in these setups. And then of course down here, you got a VPN provider, an VPN type, username, password, time zone, and how often you want it to update. Of course, be sure to update that for your specific bit of information, or for your specific setup rather. If you're looking for more information about how to do some of these things, again, links to everything will be in the video description as far as how to change the VPN type, the VPN service provider, all of that will be linked in that Gluetun link down below. So now that we've got this, what we're going to do is we're going to click on deploy. And this is immediate. Well, this will throw an error that is Proxmox specific. So I'm going to click deploy here. So now it's saying creating container Gluetun creating. Oh, there it is. That's the error message I was waiting for. I had a bit of a panic moment there. Like, oh, this is just going to work magically now, right? Okay, so it says error response from daemon, error gathering device information while adding some custom device, and that's the dev ton for this device right here for the tunnel. Again, I believe this error is due to this being in a Proxmox LXC container. And if you're on that, if you've been following my tutorials doing kind of the same methodology rather that I use, we're going to go ahead and fix that real quick. This part is the Proxmox specific stuff that we're going to cover in this video. So if you're not on Proxmox, you can skip this. So here is the bit of information that I found with regards to this error, right? And this is actually from the Gluetun wiki from the same developer. Basically, right here, having issues with the TUN device or the tunnel device. We're going to edit this right here, this etc pve lxc, and then the container id.conf, right? So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. What I need to do here at this point is come back up to my node up here and go to the shell. And then I want to do nano etc pve lxc, and then whatever our container number is. In this case, it is 133. So I'm going to hit enter. And here is our configuration for this LXC container. What I need to do here is actually add a few lines to the end of this. So I'm just going to scroll down to the very bottom. And then I'm just going to grab these 3 lines right here. And this is just allowing devices and that sort of thing. And then doing the DevNet tunnel and all of that kind of stuff. It basically enables all of that. Again, this page and all of the resources will be in the description, so you can read up on that for yourself. So what I want to do is come back over to Proxmox and paste this in and do Control O and enter and Control X to exit. Now what I need to do, now that I've edited that container's configuration file, I actually need to restart this container. So we'll do restart. Reboot now. Okay, so here we are just a couple of moments later. The container, the Proxmox LXC container has rebooted. It's a lot to say in my dumb brain. Anyway, our Proxmox container is rebooted, so now we can come back over here to Dockge. I'm just going to go ahead and refresh. And we've still got our Docker Compose here that failed a moment ago because of the device, the tunnel device. So what we're going to do is go ahead and click on Start and give this a second. And now it says we have started. We're not getting that error message anymore. So there is how to fix the DevNet TUN or the tunnel issue that you may run into with regards to a Proxmox LXC, specifically in this case with Gluetun. But if you ever run into another tunnel issue, this may also be the solution you're looking for. So what we want to do next is actually just make sure that we're actually getting a new IP address for the device. It looks like we are connected via Australia, Queensland specifically. So let's go ahead and just do a bash on this. And then we're going to switch to SH because bash isn't available for Gluetun in this capacity. So what we're going to do, we can't do a curl ifconfig.io. That's going to throw an error because curl isn't installed. See, there we go. What I want to do though is a wget. Like so. That's going to download the information and output an index.html file. And then we can just do cat index.html and see that we've got that 202.125.43.13 IP address. And if I come back over to the terminal here, right there is the same IP address so that we know we're connected to our VPN. Okay, so at this point, we've got our Gluetun VPN container up and running, and we're getting an IP address. So our next step will be to install a container and then attach it to Gluetun. So let's go ahead and take a look at how to do that now. Okay, so for demonstrative purposes, we're going to use a couple of different Docker containers and route their traffic through Gluetun. The first one that I want to take a look at is actually Wallace. We just took a look at Wallace recently in a different video, and that's what we're going to use, at least for one of the examples in this video, to route the traffic through Gluetun. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to come up here, we're going to click on Compose. I'm just going to call this Wallace, like so, and then I'm going to go ahead and paste this in here. Now, all of this is what more or less what the Wallace Docker Compose looks like, just to deploy it in a standard Docker configuration. We've got, let me change that, doesn't matter. So we've got our version, our service, Wallace, container name, image, port. So these ports we're actually going to have to move over to Gluetun. So again, if you haven't seen how to do that, we'll take a look at it here in just a moment. We've got an environment variable of the time zone. We've got some volumes. Again, you can map these wherever. Again, this Wallace container is just for demonstrative or demonstrative purposes. So you'll want to translate this information to other containers as you need for your setup, because this can be used for all kinds of different things, including applications that let you acquire Linux ISOs. So just something to keep in mind there. So what I want to do, I tell you what, first, let's do this, right? So we're just going to go ahead and deploy this as it is. I'm just going to go ahead and click on deploy right here. We'll give this a second to do its thing, and then we'll come back, we'll do some testing, and then we'll get it attached to Gluetun. Okay, again, just a couple of moments later, we've got our Wallace install up and running. And if I come over to here and I click on this port 80 right here, there it is. There is Wallace up and running. I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to close actually all these other tabs. What I want to do is actually click on Bash. Again, this container doesn't have Bash available, but we can switch to SH up here. We're going to do just what we did a moment ago over in the Gluetun container. I'm going to do a wget ifconfig.io. Now it's saved that index.html file, and what I'm going to do is cat index.html, and right there, that is my home's IP address. I'm going to blur most of that so you can't see it, but that is my home's IP address. Let's fix that. Let's make it so that it's not my home's IP address, and it's actually my VPN IP address. So what I want to do is come back over here to Wallace, and I want to edit this. What I want to do is actually remove these two lines right here, these ports right here, where it says ports and then 8880. I want to delete those lines because we're going to move those lines over to the Gluetun container. That's how this system works. The other thing that we have to do is add another line to this right here at the bottom. And this is how we're going to tell Wallace to route its traffic, through a different container. Now, typically, if you're familiar with doing this in Portainer, you would do like network mode service Gluetun. However, that doesn't work here. When I use service, in this case, it throws an error. In fact, I'll just show you here. Now, we've got our network mode, again, service Gluetun. Gluetun is our service, right? Gluetun is right here. If I click deploy, it's going to say, hey, service Wallace depends on an undefined service Gluetun, invalid compose project. That doesn't help us at all, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to change this to container, like so. And then we're going to click on deploy. So it's going to go ahead and do this recreate here. And then because we actually gave it the container option over in our network mode, it should work just fine, sort of. We haven't added the port 80 over to the Gluetun container just yet. So now we've got Wallace up and running. However, I don't believe it's actually going to work. Because we don't have any ports on it, but let's find out. Port 80, nope, like so. Nothing. It's not going to give us any information because there's no networking set up presently. So what we're going to do is come back to Dockge. We're going to come over to Gluetun. We're going to edit Gluetun here, and we're going to come over to where the ports are. And remember that we need port 80 here. So we're going to do port 80 and then colon and then port 80. And I'm going to give it a comment. I'm going to call it Wallace, like so. And then I'm going to click deploy. There we go. So now we're up and running again. All of this looks good. I'll give this another second here. Public IP address. Okay, so now we're in Chicago, right? It's changed our public IP address because we rebooted the VPN container. But we've still got a situation here. If I come over and refresh this, it's not going to work. So what we're going to do, we're going to come over to the Wallace container, and right here we've got edit, restart, update, stop, and then there's this arrow that drops down. We're going to click stop and inactive. It's going to do just that. It's going to stop the container. And then a couple of moments later, it's going to just kind of leave us here. It says container Wallace was removed. Now, if I click start, we're going to say container Wallace is started. And all of this looks good. So now let's come over here, back over to our IP address on port 80, refresh, and there's Wallace. So I'm going to try to explain kind of what happened and what the workaround for that was. When you deploy Docker container, that container on your Docker server gets an identifier, an ID number, or just an ID in general. It's got numbers and characters and all kinds of stuff in it, right? So when we modified it and then redeployed it with the new ports on it, it got a new identifier. And that's just how Docker works. The problem is when we attached Wallace to Gluetun, Wallace was looking for that initial identifier, that initial identification string from when we first deployed Gluetun and then attached Wallace to it. Well, when we redeployed Gluetun with the modified ports, Gluetun got a new identifier, but that doesn't propagate out and update the other containers. That's for security reasons, really. If we're getting down to it, you don't want to run the risk of a container that you've attached to getting updated by a bad actor and then pushing all of that out and then compromising your other systems, right? It's for security reasons. So what we have to do is then tell all of our Wallace container and our other containers to basically go look for that new Gluetun Docker identifier string. So if we just do a stop and restart, it doesn't do that. Or if we even just do a restart, the container doesn't actually go out and look for the new Gluetun identifier. In order to get the new Gluetun identifier, we have to do that stop and let me find it again. The stop and inactive. We have to click that and then click start for the container to be rebuilt, and then go look for the new identifier on Gluetun. I hope that makes sense. It was kind of convoluted. I'm aware of that. It's just a weird thing that I think after you go through it a couple of times, it will make sense to you. So I encourage you to go through this process multiple times. We're going to do another couple examples that will hopefully help expand on that. But anyway, that's kind of the gist of how that works. Basically, every time you update Gluetun, it gets a new identifier. All of the containers that were running through Gluetun now need to be stopped and kind of recreated in order to get the new identifier to communicate with it. I think maybe that's the most concise way I can explain this, but let's do another example just to make sure. So what we're going to do is come up here, we're going to click compose. We're going to paste that in there. I'm going to grab the name and I'm going to paste that in there again. The container I'm using here is irrelevant, right? But what I do want to do is actually grab these ports right here and click and just delete those. We're going to delete all of that. All of this is fine. Again, down here, we've got network mode service Gluetun. This needs to be container Gluetun, like so. If we do service, again, it's going to fail saying, oh, we don't recognize that. Container Gluetun works just fine here. I'm going to go ahead and click on deploy. Okay, so our container is up and running. All of this looks good. What I want to do, of course, is come back over here to Gluetun. I'm going to edit Gluetun, and I'm going to go ahead and paste these ports in here as well. Oops. Like so. And you notice that I've got comments on all of these just so I know which ports are associated with which other containers. I encourage you to do this for your own sanity. I didn't used to do this, and it was a nightmare. So now we've got our new ports. This is for the container that we just deployed. I'm going to go ahead and click on deploy. I'm going to let this recreate. And then it's actually going to break the connections for both of the previous containers that I had up and running. So that's frustrating, but again, we're going to fix it. So again, it's downloading all of the information that it needs. And here in a moment, it will give us an IP address from a new country or a new state or a new something. Okay, so we're back in, this time we're in New Zealand, right? So what we're looking for is this 961.240.103. However, if I come over here, let's say I want Wallace, that's on port 80. If I click port 80 right here, it's not gonna work, right? Can't be reached. So again, what we're gonna do, and you're gonna have to do this every time you add a new container to your setup in this method. We're gonna come up here, we're gonna do stop and inactive, it's stopping. Okay, now that it's stopped, we'll click start. And now that it's started, let's come back over here to Gluetun and let's click port 80 again, because that was our Wallace port, and there's Wallace. So now we've got port 8080. So again, we're going to click the stop and inactive over here. We're going to give this a second to do its thing, to stop. Now that it's done that, we can click Start. And now, if I come back over here to Gluetun, we're looking for port 8080, which is right there. And it's actually going to throw an unauthorized error. And that's because of clickjacking protection and CORS protection. If I just come back up there like so, now we're up and running on this container as well. So let's make sure that they actually have the right IP addresses associated with them. Again, we're looking for this 179.6.1.240.103 IP address because that's what our Gluetun IP address is. So now hopefully both of our other containers will have the same IP address when I do the wget command or the curl command on them. So we're going to click bash. We're going to do curl ifconfig.io. And right there, 179.6.1.240.103. We come back to Gluetun. Hey, look, it's the same IP address as right there, which tells us that that container's traffic is running through Gluetun. So let's do this one more time. We're going to check on Gluetun. We're going to click bash, and then of course we're going to click switch to sh, and we're going to do wget ifconfig.io. Connecting, saved. Again, we'll do a cat index.html, and there is that same IP address. Okay, so we're back on our Dockge desktop here. What we're going to do is click on Compose, like so. We're going to go ahead and just do Hoogle, like so. We're going to go ahead and paste that in. Again, we've got port 5000 that we're using right here for this setup. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to copy that and just get rid of those two lines. What I want to do is actually, while I'm thinking about it, I want to take that port 5000 and put it over on Gluetun. So I'm going to go ahead and pop Gluetun open in a new tab. We're going to click Edit. We're going to come over to here. We're going to paste that in there, and then we're going to add Hoogle. If I could type like so, port 5000 is what we're looking for there. We're going to go ahead and just redeploy this so that it's kind of doing its thing in the background while we come back over to Hoogle and add the stuff that we need here. In this case, it just needs to be network mode. Mode is going to be container and then Gluetun. Let's make sure I don't have any typos in there. All of that looks good. Let's make sure that Gluetun is up and running again. Cool, we're in Florida this time. We can see it right there. So let's come back over to here. Oh, we've got our Hoogle, we've got our stack name, we've got our version 2. We don't need that up there anymore. Hoogle, image, container, that's it, right? So let's go ahead and click on deploy. Go ahead and give this a second to do its thing. And then hopefully, once this is done, it will have a Florida IP address when I do an ifconfig pull. Okay, so here we are just a couple of minutes later. Hoogle deployed with no issues that I can see. So what we want to do is we're going to come over to bash. Okay, we're going to switch to sh. I'm just going to do a wget ifconfig.io. And then we'll do a cat of index.html. 146.70.38.97. Let's make sure that ties in with our Gluetun, which is right there. Okay, so at this point, we got Hoogle set up and configured to work with Gluetun, but remember, we updated our Gluetun install, which means that all of the other containers that were connected to it have lost that identifier. So now we need to go back, well, like I said earlier, and backtrack to our other connected containers, or the other containers that were connected to Gluetun, and basically recreate them. So let's jump back over to my desktop and do that real quick. Okay, so here we are, we're back on our desktop. Again, once we redeploy these, recreate these other containers, and we do a curl or a wget of the ifconfig website, we're looking for this like, let's call it a 3897 address right there, okay? So what we're gonna do, we've got, let's go ahead and do this one, and we're going to do stop and inactive. We're going to give this a second to stop and shut down. I guess that's the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to click start. So it's creating. Cool. Now we're going to do bash, right? And then we're going to do curl ifconfig.io. And there's that 3897 IP address that we're looking for. So let's do this one more time. We're going to do it with Wallace. Again, we're going to do stop and inactive. We're going to let it stop. Once it's stopped, we're going to go ahead and click start. Like so. Give this a second to spin back up. Cool. So we're going to click bash. We're going to switch to sh. Get my mouse out of the way. I'm going to say wget ifconfig.io. Right there, and then we're going to do a cat of index.html, and there is that 38.97 IP address. So there are a couple of different ways, there are a couple of different orders of operation in which you can do this, where you can move all of the ports over to Gluetun and then deploy your containers, or you can kind of mix and match however you want to do it. However, there are some caveats to this, right? Obviously, we've seen every time we add a new container to our Gluetun mix, all of the other containers are going to have to be reattached in Dockge anyway through the stop and whatever that other, in that drop-down arrow. So we're going to stop it that way. Once it's stopped, then we can click start and it will recreate and grab the new identifier for Gluetun. Here's the other thing. Basically, anytime Gluetun gets redeployed, you're going to have to go through and reconnect all of your containers if you use this method of connecting your containers to Gluetun. Okay, so we've taken a look at how we can deploy all of our containers separately, where we've got a Gluetun installation, we've got a Google installation, and we've got a Wallace installation. And all of those different things are separate individual containers that were deployed at different times, right? That is probably the most practical way that this will happen with most people out there, right? They're going to install their Gluetun, and then as they continue to add additional containers, they will deploy those containers and then attach them to Gluetun the way that we just demonstrated. Now, maybe you're not like that. Maybe you've got a really long Docker Compose with Gluetun and all of your applications already preset to go. Let's take a look at how to do that, because I've got that solution for you as well. What we're going to do is come over to our Dockge instance. We're going to click Compose. Then we're going to paste that in there, and that's a really long Docker Compose. Oops, let's get rid of some of this. I copied too much information, I believe. I sure did. All right. So you might have something like this, except that I need to, container, right? Not service, it needs to be container. Right there. All of that looks good. Okay. So here's the thing though, like if you've got all of this in one big Docker Compose like this, all of your containers are going to be set up under this single Docker Compose. So we're going to call it Big Stack. Oops, Big Stack, like so. And then we're going to click deploy. Now, of course, that went really fast because I've already downloaded and deployed all of these containers already. But basically, everything here should be working once we get our new IP address. There we go. Now we're in Italy. So let's jump over here to there. There's our Wallace installation. We've also got this. And again, that's because of CORS and cross-site scripting protection, but there is that as well. So there are a couple of different ways that you could go about this. You could deploy Gluetun and then individually deploy all of your different containers and attach them as we showed in the first part of this video. Or if you just kind of want to set it and forget it sort of situation, you can create one big Docker Compose and deploy everything all at once if you want to go that route. So hopefully this video was helpful. This video idea was actually presented to me in a comment, and I appreciate that. If you've got other video ideas that you'd like to see, definitely let me know in the comment section of this video. Also, again, everything in this video will be linked in the video description with regards on how to do this, how to deploy this, that sort of thing. Hopefully you found the video helpful, interesting, enlightening, educational, whatever. And if you did, do me a favor, give the video a thumbs up. That really would help me out quite a bit. If you want to continue to support the channel in other ways, you could subscribe, you could become a patron, you could become a channel member if you wanted to, but I don't really do much with channel memberships here. But if you join Patreon or become a channel member for literally as little as $1 a month, you can get ad-free access to my content when it's available. So just some stuff to think about. Please don't put yourself out. Make sure you're taken care of before you consider that. So I think with all that said, I'm going to wrap this up. I do want to thank you guys for spending a few minutes of your day with me today, and I'll talk to you in the next video.